I'm Molly Superthorpe. Welcome to my channel, where I offer bite-sized tutorials and demonstrations in calligraphy and hand lettering, and upload a brand new video every Friday. This week, I'm going to use this gorgeous set of paper samples that I've received from Indian Cotton Paper Company. And each one is a different color in their offerings. And I thought that they were the perfect size for cute little place cards. And having each one a different color would be especially fun. So I'm going to create a set of place cards here today using names of authors and artists that I love. And some of them are alive and working today, and others are long gone. But if you're curious which name corresponds to which artist, you can check out the description below where I've described each one. I also plan to use and demonstrate my Finetec metallic watercolor palette for each of these. And I think I'll choose a different color for each place card. And lastly, I'm going to demonstrate how I use this chalk pencil, which is originally intended for fabric, but a lot of calligraphers use it for darker papers, to sketch out some of my names before I calligraph them. This is a technique some calligraphers prefer, myself included, when you only have one piece of paper to work with, when it's really a do or die situation and you can't afford to mess up the paper. I only have one sample of each of these, so I hope that I don't mess any of them up irreparably. You do always have the option to turn it over and calligraph the back and hope that nobody flips their card over, but in any case, I'm going to sketch out the names and then calligraph them so that you can see how calligraphers go about creating sketches that they can erase after the calligraphy is done and dried. So I'm just sketching here very roughly. The beauty of these particular pencils is that I know that they erase perfectly. So if I don't press down too hard in a way that's going to make an indent in the paper, I know that the pencil chalk itself is going to be easy to erase once the ink is over it. Oops, made a typo. On cotton papers like this that have a lot of fiber and texture, it is important that you erase very lightly because you can disturb the fibers and it can create a permanent mark. If you can't see this very well, I'm going to switch to an extremely soft artist pencil for these lighter ones. And again, if I don't press down too hard in a way that would leave an actual indent in the paper, then I know that I will be able to erase this pencil. Now that comes with years of doing this, so I just happen to know that this particular pencil will be erasable. If you don't know yet, then that's definitely something you're going to have to experiment with on scrap paper before you use a pencil to create a sketch on a valuable sheet of paper. I now have my 5 cards sketched out, and I'll move on to the calligraphy. It is very important that when you're using fibrous paper, handmade cotton paper, recycled paper, anything of that nature that has a lot of natural fibers in it, it's important that you choose a nib that is pretty stiff and that is going to have the least likelihood of snagging on the paper fibers and creating splatters and ink bleeds. So one nib that I really like for that is the G nib series. They're from different brands, but G nibs are relatively large and stiff, which means that they're not that flexible. So the tines themselves don't separate very, very easily, which is going to minimize the chance that one of those sharp little points is going to snag on a fiber as it moves up. G nibs are made by a number of brands. You have your Nikko G, Tachikawa G, and this is the Zebra G. They're all relatively similar. They have different characteristics, but I like them all, and I'm just going to select by chance the Zebra G because I have a lot of them on hand. I'm also going to use this cute little oblique pen holder. If you know my work, you know that I generally prefer straight holders, but there's something so fancy and delicate about the place cards I'm making today that I thought it would be fun to demonstrate it with a slightly fancier looking holder. So I'm going to insert this nib into my holder. And the holder, by the way, is created by a brand called Rubato Pen, and I will link them below as well. Now, there are lots of ways to prep a brand new nib so that all of those chemicals and oily residue that may have appeared during the manufacturing process get taken away. Those chemicals can create a slightly waterproof coating, which, needless to say, when combined with ink, is a bad combination. It makes your ink bead off and run off the nib, and the ink flow is really affected. So there are lots of ways. One of them is chemicals like Windex. Some people stick their nib into a potato, but for me, the fastest and easiest method is just to very quickly pass the nib through a flame. You see how quickly I'm doing that? Just a little bit of fire is all that it takes. Of course, use a lot of caution when doing that, and don't hold it under too long. It's better to do too little than too much. Some nibs, especially the more delicate ones, may slightly change color and oxidize when you do that, but that's completely normal and fine. In my view, it doesn't affect the integrity of the nib, it just slightly can darken it. But these zebra nibs are so incredibly robust that you can't even tell that you've burned it. So there are a couple methods for beginning to wet your watercolor palette. You can, of course, stick your brush into fresh, clean water and then dab it on the palette and get some of that watercolor moistened. Another method that I like to use is just taking these really inexpensive pipettes, and you can reuse them over and over and over, and they're very affordable. And I just pick up some water. You can see I have a clean glass of water here. And I just pick up a little bit of it and I drop a few droplets on my palettes, all the ones that I know I'm going to use. This is an extremely stiff bristled brush. You can see that it has gotten a lot of wear and tear. I will link one very good stiff bristled brush below. Basically, in my view, the cheaper the brush, the better for this particular use. You're not painting with this brush, you're just picking up ink and putting it on the nib. And for that purpose, you don't necessarily need a soft or expensive brush. You need one that's really durable and robust. So next what I do is I take my nib and I take the brush and I just scrape it over the nib, applying some paint. I didn't get quite enough to begin with. So you can see that beads of ink are being applied to this nib. You can see there's a nice bead of ink on there right now. You can see that what I'm doing here is holding in my left hand the paintbrush. You don't necessarily want to do that over your paper in case you accidentally create a splatter. But I'll hold my paintbrush in the left hand and my holder in the right. And that way I have a pretty quick system of reapplying the paint. All right, so what you want to make sure of is that you don't over ink your nib. Partly because we can't make that many mistakes here. We only have the one sheet of paper per name, but also because if your paint consistency is too wet, what it's going to do is create a big bubble of ink. It's always better to have a nib that's a bit too dry that you can go over again at the end than to have a bubble of ink, which is very, very hard to remove. So you see how metallic that is? It's absolutely gorgeous. And when it dries, it'll have even more of a sheen. And of course, when we erase the pencil, it'll be even more beautiful. Now that everything is dry, it's time to just erase our original pencil. Remember that I said that this just has to be really light because first of all, you don't want to rub off any of the ink, and second of all, on these fibrous papers, you can risk tearing up the fiber, which would create a permanent mark. So when I rub off the eraser shavings, I also never like to just do quick motions like this. On delicate papers, I first go around to pick up any shavings that are stuck, and then I wipe it off like this. And then I inspect it to make sure all the pencil is off. I think that these turned out beautifully. I would highly recommend this Indian cotton paper company, and of course Finetec watercolors, which are pretty renowned in the calligraphy community already for good reason. But I think that they all turn out beautifully, and I would absolutely love to sit down at one dinner table with all of these amazing artists and authors. So again, you can look in the description box because I've told you who each one is. Here's a quick shot of the color palette in case you're interested in this Indian cotton paper company. We have white, ivory, pink, light gray, dark gray, deep blue, and of course black.